welcome back to another Bible Study with Me video. Today I wanted to talk about the concept of Christians being lights and letting our light shine. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus calls us to be the salt of the earth and lights in the world. And I wanted to take a quick minute to talk about what the Bible says and what Jesus really means for us being the lights of the world. Let's get into it. In the last couple weeks, I have kind of felt a confirmation and connection on this topic of being light and salts to the earth in relation to ministry and discipleship. I am a part of the young adults group at my local church, and we have been studying all of that section between Matthew chapter 5 and 6. And we talked about the Sermon on the Mount being like the key to a good and righteous life according to what God desires of us. On top of that, me and some of the young adults also participated in a youth retreat that happened just this past weekend. The theme of the weekend was, hungering and thirsting for righteousness and how we can, express ourselves truly as God pleases in the world. There were two guest speakers. One of the speakers' messages I will be referencing a lot in this study, and it just really helped me understand what it means to be a light. And I prepared a study that both uses one of those guest speakers' messages, as well as just breaking down what that passage really means for us as Christians. So as I mentioned before, the main passage for this concept is Matthew 5, 13 to 16. It says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty again? You are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a table, giving light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." I'm going to take a moment to just break down this passage verse by verse. Really try to, understand what Jesus is saying here. It is using imagery, all to really describe our position as Christians in this world. So first he says, you are the salt of the earth. Salt is a mineral composed primarily of sodium chloride. You can think of all the many purposes that salt has. I came up with a few, and the most common one is on our tables. When it's filtered and granulated, we know that it brings season to food. In the same form, it also preserves food. I don't think we use it much now with the invention of fridges. One thing I learned today too is that actually salt is used in soap, keeping a balance between the hardness and the softness of the soap. It staves off pestilence in plants if you're a gardener or you have a green thumb, in the form of Epsom salt. It serves healing and regulating functions for our muscles and our nervous system. It also aids in the dissolving of snow and ice. I live in Canada, and we are salting our sidewalks and roads. In the young adults group that I attend, we discussed that these many usages of salt can kind of represent the numerous types of callings and positions that we as Christians can take in our church and in our community. We'll talk a little bit more about those callings and positions later. The second part of verse 13 talks about what makes salt less salty. Obviously, Jesus is trying to say that there is ways in which salt can become less salty and less useful. Over long periods of time, either through moisture or through contact with some metals, the saltiness can deplete. This might represent the influences that we let into our lives, whether they come in the form of fellowship with people, forms of media, and even attitudes that we can take. They can, over time, decrease our effectiveness in the kingdom, our effectiveness of the salt that God has called us to be. But Jesus doesn't even stop there. He goes on to even more imagery. In verse 14, he says, "You are the light of the world." So how can we be lights of the world? Well, it has connection to our Christian identity, our identity in Christ. In John 9:5, it says, "While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Since he is no longer physical in this world, we as Christians are his representatives. Going back to John 8:12, it says, "Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." In 2 Corinthians 5:20, it says, "Therefore we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal to the world through us." So all that is to say that Jesus is the light. But because Jesus is in us, because we've accepted him and accepted his spirit within ours, the same light that he has now been placed in us. So now you're probably thinking, okay, I'm a light. Great. Now, how do I apply this to my Christian life? I don't even know what that means practically. Unfortunately, it's not a straight answer. It's truly based on your personal journey with God, but I do have a few notes here that might get us thinking a little bit more. The guest speaker at the youth retreat that I referenced before, most of the points here that I will make are from his sermon. One of the key points that he makes is that resolutions don't happen without a plan. So it's around February time, January just passed. Usually people are making New Year's resolutions. The concept, resolutions, do not happen without a plan. I'm gonna make New Year resolutions but never fulfill them, because why? We don't really make a plan forward to make that resolution happen. The guest speaker actually said that Jesus is speaking to a resolution in the Matthew 5 passage. A resolution that we are to come to understand about ourselves and our purpose in the world. There's a resolution before us. Now we have to take action and start making plans to fulfill those callings that God has placed on us. And so he went on to, bring some ideas to light about how we act on them. And one of the points was that we be resilient and kill compromise. In Daniel chapter 3, 13-30, we learn about 3 boys among the number of God's people in exile to Babylon under the rule of Nebuchadnezzar. These boys were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, but we know them more as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In this passage, we learn about Nebuchadnezzar and how he built an idol for the people of Babylon, and he put up a decree saying that at a certain time, when the music plays, you have to bow down to the idol in the center of the city. And these 3 boys made a very clear example as Jews, as people of God, that they would not bow down to the idol that Nebuchadnezzar put up. They later learned that if you refuse to bow down to the idol, that you would be thrown into a burning furnace. In verses 16-18, these boys make a heart-stopping statement. Understanding the context will help you understand the gravity of what these boys are saying in these verses. First, they are brought into the throne room of Nebuchadnezzar. Try to imagine yourself going into a place of parliament, of government, of monarchy. You naturally want to go into those places with reverence and with zip it, don't say a thing, and just say yes and no and move on, because you'll probably get shot if you say anything against the minister. They are also before this leader on their hearts that they have broken the law. So that even adds to the tension of the moment. With that all in mind, read these verses. Verses 16-18, they say, Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to give you an answer. If the God we serve exists, then he can rescue us from the furnace you threaten us with. And he can rescue us from the power that even you, the king, has. But even if he chooses not to rescue us, We want you as king to know that we will not serve your gods and worship the golden statue that you have set up. It's just a wow moment. I'm sure that in that very moment, the courtroom was silent. They expressed extreme resilience and lack of compromise. In this way, we learn about this beautiful character that God has asked us to take upon ourselves, this strong resilience to speak against anything that would cause us to compromise or to let influence our worship, our praise, our reverence to the one and only God. The next point that he talked about is staying plugged in. At the stage, he actually had this lamp. We learn from Jesus in John 15, 1-8, in the imagery of the vine and the branches, that if we remain in him, he will remain in us, and we will remain connected to the life source, which is Jesus. And we learned that apart from the vine, we have and can do nothing. And so what the guest speaker did for us was that he had that lampstand connected, and he had somebody pull the plug and say, okay, without God, nothing. We have no electricity. We have no source of life. Plug it in, we have light. We are using our light. We are letting our light shine, and we are obviously feeding our light, the electricity that comes from the source. It was a beautiful image that really brought home what Jesus is teaching us in the Matthew 5 passage. We are a lamp whose cord runs down and is plugged into an outlet. The outlet is the source of electricity, the source of light. Naturally, when we unplug, the power to our lamp is gone. Without protection, any small trip, flick, or tug can unplug us from the source. So we choose to reinforce, to guard our hearts, as Proverbs 4:23 says, guard your hearts, for it is the source of life. And how do we guard? We guard by the habits and disciplines that we place in our lives to protect that plug from becoming unplugged. To name a few, some of these habits are attentive Bible reading, desiring after His Word, praying, seeking God's wisdom and provision, fasting, cleansing ourselves of influences that can corrupt us and make us compromise God in our lives, and worshiping, enabling and strengthening our spirits. With those habits and disciplines in place, we are less likely to have our plug pulled. He didn't even end there. He actually had a final point that talked about making ourselves available to God. Jesus said that we are a light, but also for who? The world. We have an obligation to act on that which is going out and being the light in the darkness. Whatever that looks like for you personally is up to you and God. All the purposes of salt could represent the different positions in ministry that we could take in our community and in our church, ways that we are serving God and serving others. That is a way in which our light shines. Are we making ourselves available to God? It's a heavy and deep topic, and it really can be convicting. And if you're feeling convicted right now, I encourage you to just pray, God, show me how I can be more active in my faith. Show me, Lord, how I can share your love. God is always faithful to answer, and He is always faithful to forgive. Thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate the comments that some of you have been leaving on my videos. And thank you so much for your support and your encouragement. I'll see you in another one. Bye.